What if the power you thought others held over you was only the shadow of your own unclaimed influence? What if every silence you kept, every boundary you enforced, every breath you withheld was already bending the room in your direction? And what if the version of you emerging now is the one they can no longer predict or control? Step into that shift, it's already reshaping your fate. A hesitation flickers inside your mind the moment someone looks a bit too long, as if they are scanning for seams you didn't realize were exposed. In that flicker, you sense how quickly the urge to explain rises, rushing to fill their imagination before it forms its own shape. But every explanation sharpens their map of you. What if your instinct to clarify is the very thing teaching others where your walls are thin? Your internal rhythm shifts when you notice how easily people read the movements you don't monitor, the lifted eyebrow, the softened jaw, the breath you release too early. These micro-reveals betray intentions you haven't spoken, giving strangers access to patterns you never meant to share. Yet the one who watches instead of reacts becomes unreadable. What if every unguarded cue is a thread someone else learns to pull? Attention coils beneath your awareness when you remember moments where silence made others uneasy, forcing them to project motives onto you. Their mind filled the void you refused to fill, revealing their fears, their desires, their expectations. Silence exposed them, not you. What if you realized that the less they know, the more they reveal? A small internal thrum appears when you examine your habit of over-disclosure, that reflex to soften edges by making yourself easy to interpret. But openness becomes a script others rehearse their strategies with. The more predictable you are, the more leverage you surrender without noticing. What if your need to be understood is the doorway through which influence escapes? A deeper pulse rises when you finally admit that you don't choose your next thought. It arrives, unrequested, shaping your reactions before you evaluate them. If your own mind moves in shadows beyond your control, imagine how easily perception can be shaped by what you expose. So the question sharpens: if visibility gives others the blueprint to influence you, why offer the map at all? A ripple of heat moves through your awareness the instant someone presses the right emotional button, a tone too sharp, a pause too long, a glance that lands where your doubts already live. Your mind wants to respond before you've even named the feeling, exposing the very pattern they hope to trigger. What if the reaction that feels inevitable is simply the one you've rehearsed the longest? Your posture shifts internally when irritation rises, not because the moment is serious, but because it touches an old bruise you pretend you've outgrown. Emotion wants to escape quickly, to mark the air with your vulnerability before you can contain it. But the one who holds the feeling without performing it controls the tempo. What if your silence can redirect a whole conversation without a single word? A sharpened clarity forms when you notice how people study your micro-reactions more closely than your arguments. They watch the twitch near your eye, the tightened breath, the half-second delay before answering. These subtle reveals disclose the fears you thought were hidden. Yet restraint turns those same fears into encrypted signals no one can decode. What if unreadability is the most disarming presence you can offer? Your inner landscape steadies when you recognize that calmness is not surrender but dominance, a pause that disturbs the rhythm your opponent expected. By refusing to match their intensity, you force them into uncertainty, and uncertainty is where their strategy frays. What if the power you thought belonged to louder voices actually lives inside the breath you refuse to rush? A deeper current moves beneath your thoughts as you sense how often your emotional impulses try to reclaim control. But the mind that learns to sit with its own storms stops giving others the power to forecast its weather. So the question sharpens: if your reactions reveal your entire playbook, what might unfold when you stop offering the script at all? Pause inside this shifting awareness, it's already rewriting your next move. A low tension hums beneath your thoughts when you realize how often you've mistaken appreciation for allegiance. People praise reliability not because they cherish you, but because they benefit from the stability you provide. That recognition alters the emotional temperature inside you, revealing a quiet imbalance you kept excusing? What if their gratitude was simply the currency they used to keep you predictable? Your perception sharpens when you remember how someone's tone changed the moment you became slightly less available. Their politeness thinned, their urgency flared, their mask slipped just enough to expose need beneath the surface. That shift wasn't personal, it was structural. What if dependency, not affection, is the real portrait of a connection? A subtle awakening moves through you when you replay moments where people panicked at your distance. They weren't mourning you, they were mourning the function you performed in their life, the buffer, the solver, the steady voice. Distance forced them to confront the truth. Without you, their system destabilizes. What if absence reveals the hierarchy more accurately than loyalty? Your breath deepens when you consider how often you solve problems no one solved for you. Each rescue built an invisible pathway of expectation, solidifying your role in ways you didn't consent to. But the more someone relies on what only you can provide, the more the dynamic bends around your influence. What if your exhaustion has been the proof of your leverage? A deeper echo forms when you sense the old impulse to earn safety by being indispensable. Yet the one who understands dependency learns to wield it, not escape it. So the question sharpens, if the true balance of power lies in who needs whom, how differently would you treat the connections shaping your life? Hold that thought, you're beginning to see the architecture beneath the surface. A shift unfolds inside you when you notice how effortlessly people reveal themselves to the one who appears gentle, harmless, unthreatening. They lower their guard, convinced they're reading your entire essence when they've only met the version you allowed. That miscalculation becomes your cover, a quiet shelter for strategy. What if the safest place to think freely is behind the mask they never question? Your awareness sharpens as you recall how often others talk themselves into vulnerability when you simply listen. Their assumptions fill the space your silence leaves open, exposing fears, alliances, desires, and motives without interrogation. They think they're studying you. In truth, they're mapping their own mind. What if their projection is the camouflage you've been underusing? A narrow spark moves through your chest when someone tries to decode your intentions and fails, spiraling into interpretations that reveal more about them than about you. Their uncertainty becomes a resource, a veil that hides your next move inside their confusion. What if their need to understand you is the very thing that keeps them predictable? Your internal pace slows when you examine the old belief that honesty equals strength. Honesty has its place, but strategy requires selective exposure. Not deceit, design. Your expressions, pauses, tonal shifts, and apparent softness become tools that shape expectation. What if authenticity is most powerful only when it is intentionally rationed? A deeper current gathers beneath your thoughts as you watch the ancient urge to be fully seen rise again. But the one who plays all cards openly becomes easy to disarm. The one who chooses which parts to reveal directs the entire tempo. So the question sharpens, if perception is the arena where influence is born, which mask will you wear to move freely inside it? Feel the weight of this, your invisibility is becoming a weapon. A current of urgency moves through your awareness when you sense an opening, that barely perceptible shift in someone's tone, posture, or timing. The opportunity appears and begins evaporating in the same breath, and your instinct reaches for certainty instead of motion. Yet waiting is surrender disguised as caution. What if hesitation is simply the mind rehearsing excuses for staying small? Your memories tighten when you picture the moment someone stepped forward before you did. Their decision didn't just change the outcome, it rerouted the entire emotional landscape. Suddenly, you were adjusting to a frame you didn't set, responding to a tempo you didn't choose. What if every delayed action turns you into a character instead of the author? A sharp inner clarity emerges when you observe how first movers rarely act recklessly, they act cleanly. They take steps others don't notice yet, forcing their environment to reorganize around them. Their initiative becomes gravity, pulling possibilities in their direction. What if influence belongs to the one who creates the momentum, not the one who analyzes it. Your inner voice stiffens when you confront how often you've waited for permission that no one was planning to grant. You looked for reassurance, consensus, or validation, forgetting that leadership is born in solitary decisions. Action taken early bends outcomes before opposition activates. What if your need for confirmation is the anchor slowing your ascent? A deeper pulse rises as you acknowledge the old pattern urging you to pause just a little longer. But something within you leans forward now, aware that power shifts through whoever defines the moment first. So the question sharpens: if destiny changes each time you move before the world expects it, what future have you been postponing by standing still? Let this awareness take root. Your next beginning waits on your next decisive breath. A steady pressure gathers in your chest when you realize how quickly people assemble a narrative about you before you even speak. Their mind searches for patterns, projecting past experiences onto your presence, building a silhouette that will walk ahead of you in every room. That silhouette speaks louder than intention. What if the version of you they imagine is already shaping opportunities you haven't touched? Your awareness sharpens as you recall a moment where someone treated you with disproportionate respect, not because of who you were in that interaction, but because of what your reputation had already negotiated. Influence arrived before you did, like armor silently absorbing impact. What if your name, not your effort, has been doing most of the work? A flicker of heat rises when you examine the times your reputation cracked, through a misstep, a rumor, a moment of emotional slip you didn't catch in time. You felt the air around you shift instantly, as if the structure supporting your influence had thinned. Reputation fractures quickly, but its consequences linger. What if maintaining perception is less about performance and more about controlled visibility? Your breath steadies when you understand why people gather around certainty, not because certainty is real, but because it feels safe. A reputation of composure creates a gravitational pull that others instinctively align with. Even when you feel conflicted inside, the identity they trust becomes the one they follow. What if strength is not the absence of doubt but the mastery of how doubt is perceived? A deeper current moves through you as you recognize the temptation to be understood rather than respected. But understanding invites dissection, while reputation commands distance, and distance is where power finds its shape. So the question sharpens: if perception decides the world's response to you, how intentionally are you crafting the image that walks ahead of your steps? Hold this insight: a reputation engineered is a future predetermined. If this is hitting close to home, take a second, like the video, subscribe, and stay with me. An internal shift unfolds when you notice how effortlessly people grow accustomed to what is always available. Your presence becomes background noise, comforting, predictable, unexamined. Their familiarity blinds them to your depth. In that realization, something inside you tightens, questioning why constancy has been mistaken for connection. What if your generosity has been teaching others to forget your worth? A sharper awareness rises when you recall how attention changed the moment you stepped back. Their messages took on a new caution, their curiosity sharpened, their tone adjusted as if recalibrating to unfamiliar terrain. Absence forced them into honesty, presence had let them hide behind routine. What if distance is the only environment where true intentions reveal themselves? Your thoughts deepen as you observe how scarcity alters emotional gravity. The fewer signals you send, the more meaning they assign to each one. Their imagination begins working overtime, crafting narratives around your silence, trying to decode what used to be given freely. What if silence isn't emptiness but amplified influence? A measured breath moves through you when you recognize that sacrificing yourself to be constantly accessible didn't strengthen bonds, it diluted them. By withdrawing, even gently, you restore the natural equilibrium between giving and receiving. Scarcity isn't punishment, it is recalibration. What if the space you create becomes the mirror where others finally see what you offered? A deeper resonance forms when you feel the old impulse to maintain closeness stirring again. Yet a wiser voice suggests that respect is born in the tension between presence and distance. You don't disappear, you choose your moments. So the question sharpens: if access to you became intentional instead of automatic, how dramatically would the world respond? Let this awareness settle. Your absence is beginning to speak a language your presence never could. A tremor moves through your awareness the moment someone crosses a boundary in miniature, a tone laced with entitlement, a comment that lands too sharply, a glance that carries quiet disrespect. Your mind rushes to smooth it over, to reinterpret it as harmless. Yet every dismissal plants a seed you will later call sudden. What if the danger you fear most is always announced in whispers first? Your perception tightens when you replay all the moments where the shift was visible long before the conflict erupted. You felt the warmth cool, the trust thin, the dynamic tilt by degrees. Instinct nudged you, but politeness silenced you. In that silence, the problem learned your tolerance. What if your reluctance to act early is the very leverage threats use to grow? A controlled clarity appears when you observe how erosion begins, not with betrayal, but with testing. A joke that cuts too deep, a request that ignores your time, a dismissal disguised as misunderstanding. Each tiny violation measures your threshold. Every unchallenged moment becomes permission. What if allowing the small harm is what invites the larger one? Your breath deepens when you realize prevention is not aggression, it is stewardship of your internal order. Addressing the shift, tightening the boundary, or removing access early is the cleaner path, the path that avoids the wars created by avoidance. Clarity delivered promptly is an intervention, clarity delivered late becomes a battle. What if the strength you fear using is the exact strength that would have protected your peace? A deeper pull stirs as memory confronts you, all the times you sensed the threat long before you acknowledged it. Instinct always speaks first, logic only justifies after. So the question sharpens: if you honored the first flicker of discomfort instead of waiting for confirmation, how many storms would dissolve before reaching your life? Feel this truth settle: safeguarding your world begins at the first distortion, not the final blow. A shift of perspective rises when you see how visibility tempts you into overexposure, performing strength instead of cultivating it. Eyes on you create a pressure to prove, to validate, to explain. Yet every demonstration reveals a little too much of your structure. In that awareness, a quiet intuition whispers that growth requires obscurity. What if the spotlight you chase is the same light that weakens your defenses? Your perception sharpens when you remember someone who advanced quietly while others announced every step. Their silence was not modesty, it was insulation. They built in private, far from envy, interference, and scrutiny. By the time their results appeared, they were already unassailable. What if your progress stalls because you reveal the blueprint before the foundation sets? A steady realization moves through you as you recognize the hidden cost of being seen. Visibility activates comparison, jealousy, rivalry, energies that distort your trajectory more than competitors ever could. But the shadow offers protection, it conceals your evolution while strengthening it. What if the safest place for transformation is the place no one is watching? Your internal rhythm slows when you understand that mastery thrives where interruption cannot reach it. Skills deepen when unobserved, alliances form when unannounced, discipline grows when unpraised. The world cannot corrupt what it cannot track. What if secrecy is not concealment but preservation? A deeper resonance forms as you recall the times you shared too early, inviting resistance and misunderstanding into an idea still soft and forming. A wiser voice inside you suggests that power unveiled prematurely becomes fragile. So the question sharpens: if you nurtured your ascent in quiet, how unstoppable would you become when you finally stepped into the light? Hold this insight: the shadow is not hiding you, it is preparing you. A quiet realization forms when you watch how your mind reacts before your body ever moves, tightening at a shift in someone's tone, recalibrating at a pause that lasts a heartbeat too long. Nothing physical has happened, yet the atmosphere inside you changes instantly. This is the real arena, meanings created in silence. What if every conflict you thought was external was actually unfolding in the unseen space between interpretations? Your perception sharpens when you recall how the strongest influence you've ever felt came not from force, but from presence, a look that unsettled you, a stillness that exposed your uncertainty, a silence that made you second-guess your confidence. No one touched you, yet everything shifted. What if the mind responds more fiercely to what it imagines than to what it encounters? A deeper clarity emerges when you observe how unpredictability unsettles even the most confident people. The moment they cannot forecast your reactions, they adjust themselves around you, softening their tone, revising their approach, negotiating with the tension you quietly create. Influence appears not in dominance, but in the atmosphere that surrounds you. What if your greatest leverage is the uncertainty others feel in your presence? Your breath slows when you understand that expectations determine outcomes more than facts do. The one who defines the frame decides how everyone else interprets the moment, whether a pause is respect or threat, whether silence is agreement or resistance, whether calmness is strength or calculation. The psychological landscape becomes your architecture. What if controlling perception matters more than controlling events? A deeper resonance forms as you look back at every rise and fall in your life and notice a pattern. Nothing changed until your internal stance changed first. The real game has always been internal, perception shaping perception, emotion shaping reaction, story shaping power. So the question sharpens, if mastery begins in the mind, what shifts the moment you learn to shape the space inside others? A quiet understanding settles through you as the architecture of every interaction becomes clearer. Power was never about force, volume, or confrontation. It was the unseen current beneath your thoughts, the atmosphere shaped by your restraint, the influence born from what you chose not to reveal. Each boundary you enforced, each silence you mastered, each moment you stepped back instead of forward rewired the way the world responds to you. And now, your presence carries a weight that no explanation could ever create. You've stepped into a different posture, one where perception becomes leverage, where your inner steadiness sharpens your outer impact, where relationships reorganize around your clarity instead of your compliance. Let this become your new baseline. Subscribe to stay connected to the work that strengthens this evolution. Share this awakening with someone who's ready to rise. Leave your insight in the comments so others can feel the shift, and return often to the teachings that refine your inner architecture. A different future is already forming around you, and it's waiting for your next deliberate breath.